Any of you familiar with the words of Cardinal Moran, the Archbishop of Sydney, in a sermon he delivered there in 1909? And he was preaching at the Silver Jubilee Mass for Reverend Mother Claire Dunphy, who led the founding Mercy Nuns to Sydney. And this is what he had to say about the poorhouse in Callan. Now, the reason I'm reading this is because so many people, yourself probably included, think there are no places like this now. But I will tell you by the time I finish that there are. And he said, when I first visited the poorhouse in Callan 40 years ago, in 1861, I was struck with anguish, the conditions of the poor, huddled together without a single comforting idea, without a single spark of religion to console and comfort. It was raining. It was raining upon the old slate flags, and the people were there in their bare feet, exposed to the rain. The old people stood shivering in the cold. All these evils disappeared when the Sisters of Mercy were allowed to enter the Callan workhouses. They came as angels of love to comfort, especially in their dying moments. And when you reflect on that, you just wonder, how much has changed, or has anything changed? What you're attempting to do here today is to find some way in this very frustrating world that we can make the world a better place. When I spoke here 10 years ago, we had the Celtic tiger was running wild, as you all know. When Trust was set up in 1975, Trust was set up following work I carried out with a group of doctors in a voluntary capacity. We visited people sleeping rough, we visited people in the hostels, we visited night shelters. We worked very hard. We were quite mad. We had a lot of energy and we were excited about what we were doing. And of course, like many others, we thought 6 years later all of life's problems would be solved. But of course, that's not what life is. And you women of wisdom know that too. And I think this is where the challenge lies for all of us. We have that wisdom, and how do we use it? So when Trust was set up, we got some money from a young woman who was dying of cancer. And a group of us got together and we thought, why should we set up a charity? The state should be providing these services. If we do it, are we leaving the services off the hook? People are entitled to these services. If we work with another agency, will we be able to work maybe in a way we feel is necessary? Now, 35 years on, we are back to where we were then. The Celtic tiger has gone out the door. The Health Board paid me as a nurse for a number of years. We're at a stage now where we don't get any money from the state, and we don't seek any money from the state. We don't send out begging letters. We every day say to ourselves, the Lord works in mysterious ways. Because last Christmas, in spite of not sending out letters, we got in more money and more goods than we've ever got in before. We run a very professional service. Everything is acknowledged and receipted. Our accounts are audited by Deloitte and Touche. We have a website which is trust-ireland.ie. You'll get all the information on our trustees and everything, and I'll give you all a bookmark and a leaflet when you're going. You can look it up yourselves. So what do we see now? When we started off, we visited all the shelters. Very few people wanted to work with people who were homeless, except people like yourselves. But when a lot of money came from Europe, a lot of people started to work with people who were homeless. A lot of people with wonderful titles, absolutely wonderful titles. And titles can give the impression that things are changing. A lot of money, and I would suggest millions, has been wasted in the field of homelessness. Millions. The accommodation for some has improved, the accommodation in some of the hostels. But what has happened is there's more red tape, there's more bureaucracy, there are more experts, and there are more people who are outsiders. We don't like the term homeless because it means nothing. Homelessness isn't about housing alone. It is much more complex. It's about the person you would have seen maybe in your classroom who didn't fit in. They were shy maybe. Maybe they just weren't good looking. Maybe they didn't have parents who loved or supported them. But they just didn't even fit in at that age. And these are very often the people, if they don't get the support, and I know that some of your nuns are doing Trojan work out there in the field, quietly, they're the ones who are likely to get into drugs, into violence, and be used by people. We then had psychiatric hospitals where people with mental health problems could get into psychiatric hospitals maybe. Now, you can't get people crying out to get into hospital. We hear a lot about community care, that people can be discharged into the community, but we've never managed to define what community means. And I've no doubt that all of you felt like outsiders, and still maybe do because of everything that's gone on. But there are an awful lot of people in this country who have benefited greatly from the work that your predecessors did. So never be put off like that. Mary Robinson, our esteemed former president, said, when you speak with a different voice, you pay a price. And you do, and you become an outsider too. So we feel the term outsider is much more important, and we've had a number of education projects. Oh, I'm not watching the time. Are you, Sister Mary, are we okay? We're okay. Yeah. Anyway, she's a little bit late, doesn't matter. Time is, that's part of our problem. There's a little poem in a book I have, poems written by a man who was a street poet and who was buried in our plot in Glasnevin. And I know it's on page 51. And it goes like this. Today I spoke to no one. Nobody spoke to me. Am I dead? And I'm sure you're all familiar with that. Anyway, that's what homelessness is about. Now, we've had a number of schools projects. There was a video done on our work. You'll get all this on our website a number of years ago. And I forget the years. As we get older, I think the years go by so quickly. And we can forget some of the little nuggets of importance. But it was called A Fragile City. It was shown on RTE, and when it was shown, there was a huge response. Because it wasn't somebody sticking needles into his arm in a doorway. It wasn't somebody battered and bruised, because sometimes that turns people off. But people really saw people as if they were in their own sitting room. So there was such a good response to it, we decided we'd have a national essay competition on the theme of the outsider. And then a few years later, we had an art competition for all second levels, and that was on the same theme. So it was to try and get people to look at who is an outsider in my church, in my community, in my family, in my school, on my road, in my playgroup. Because that outsider is likely the one who's going to continue being an outsider. But if we could have a community or a world where we all our gifts and all our weaknesses, all our humanity was valued, because every one of us have something to offer us. We've had to, for the first time last year, to keep our gate closed because of the racism. Now, when we opened up our doors to people coming from Eastern Europe, it wasn't thought out like so many things in Irish life. If they had people like yourselves involved, but they wouldn't dream of, for planning. Look at what, if Catherine didn't plan and think ahead, where would you all be now, or where would we all be? So don't let that go, her focus on planning and vision and thinking and humanity. And there is a need for it now more than ever before. Last month we met people from 26 different countries. Most of them have no skills, can't speak our language, but came over here with the same dream as some of our Irish ancestors went to London and to New York. But when they went abroad, they had the language. The awful thing is that an awful lot of the people coming over haven't the language. Now, we asked the Polish priest, 2 minutes up the road from us, would he come down someday? No sound of him. Never appeared, or never will. We met a journalist from Poland, and she would not accept that some of her own people were living and dying on the streets of Dublin. Much the same as our own won't accept that we have people out there we have a death every week nearly. Just recently there was a man from Poland who was walking over the bridge down near Merchant's Quay on a Saturday morning. He'd been in with us on a Friday. He had his feet washed, he had a shower, he had a wound dressed, simple thing on his hands, was in good form, and he was walking over the bridge and he said to his friends, I can't take any more of it, and he jumped in. There was a man from Lithuania who had been in with us, and he was living down around your place, Peggy, down in Kildare somewhere, and he had a job and he had a partner. there was a relationship that he lost the job, they lost the partner, and he died. And his remains were in the matter for I don't know how long. And then one day somebody said, why about ringing us? And they did, and we had his name. That was about all we knew about him. And the only people at that funeral was Jerry, my colleague, and her husband who went with her, the social worker, and a guard. So we gave the guards, they traced his mother up in the hills, and we sent a mass bouquet, and just to know that somebody, but we don't know if she ever got it. But if that had happened a number of years ago, everyone would know. The deaths of the people who are poor don't matter. Wonderful old man, Eddie, he died in the hospice, and we got him in there a number of years ago. Very proud man, wouldn't get a medical card, wouldn't go to a doctor, lived in absolute squalor. It's a picture of him there. He had 3 dogs, Tina Turner, Jezebel, and Bruno. But he would use, we used to have a doctor for years, but we don't anymore because we feel the doctors out there people should have their medical card and that. But anyway, when I went to see him shortly before he died in the hospice, he said to me, he said, they come round and they say, well, did the bowels move today? And they'll say something else. But he said, they don't know how I feel. And it's so true. And it's so true if you go and you see, look at all our relations and friends sitting on trolleys. It's appalling. And then you have a nurse maybe who's trying to do their best to work with them. These are the issues you should all be. Don't be a bit afraid, because I always feel if you tell the truth, and if you have to put yourself out, that's what Catherine Macaulay did, and that's what's required now. And